Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Let's go back to early January. I know it already feels like a year ago, but it's only been a month. The federal Liberals were at a low point, and that may be putting it politely. A prime minister under a barrage of criticism, stepping down amid growing resignation calls from within his own team, and the party's fortunes in the eyes of the public sliding deeper and deeper into a political pit. In fact, multiple polling firms had the Conservatives flying high, enjoying a lead over the Liberals that hovered around 26 or 27 percentage points. But a week is a long time in politics, let alone a month. Since Justin Trudeau's resignation, the Liberal brand has seen a stunning reversal. As most of the headlines have recently been focused on tariff and sovereignty threats from President Donald Trump, public support for the Liberal Party has been growing. In fact, a recent poll from Innovative Research has the Liberals narrowing the gap with the Conservatives to just 13 points. Leger has it at 9. Nanos Research has it at 8. Ecos is putting the figure at just 3 points, which is virtually a tie. Despite the trend, most federal modeling still has the Conservatives cruising to victory if an election were held today. But the trend is not heading in the direction the Tories want. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with Duane Bratt, a political scientist at Mount Royal University, about what's driving voters back to the Liberal Party, how Conservatives are pivoting to try and address this shift, and how this may impact the timing of the next federal election. Duane, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Cormac.
So, Duane, a month or two ago, it seemed like the Liberal Party was dead in the water, that they had no chance in heck of winning the next election. And then in a short amount of time, it seems like things have turned around for them. They might even be competitive again. What's driving this shift?
Well, there's two theories out there. And so I'll put forward the first one and then what I think is the real driver, which is the second one. So the first one is that this is simply the bounce back after replacing an unpopular leader. And we've seen this before. When John Turner replaced Pierre Trudeau, Turner rose up in the polls and was leading in the polls before he got wiped out in the 1984 election. Same thing with Kim Campbell. After Kim Campbell replaced Brian Mulroney, she raced to the top of the polls before she fizzled out and had that horrible experience in the 1993 election. So it's a bit of a dead cat bounce that when you replace an unpopular leader, the new leader gets a bit of a honeymoon. And people have said, you know, if Turner and Campbell hadn't run such horrible campaigns, that they may have won that election. I'm skeptical of that theory. But that's approach one, that simply removing Justin Trudeau and that everything was focused on him made liberals and progressives and fence sitters come back to the Liberal Party. But the second is, I think there is something fundamentally different in 2025 compared to 1993 and 1984, and that's Donald Trump. We are not just talking about a trade war. We've had limited trade wars with the United States periodically for a long time. This is a massive trade war, but also, you know, the continued threats of annexation of Canada. And so the ballot box question has moved. It's moved from axe the tax, which Poilievre has been campaigning on for a couple of years now, to who is best able to deal with Donald Trump. And the two top Liberal contenders can put forward a pretty credible case that they would be better than Pierre Poilievre in doing so. So Chrystia Freeland can say, look, I stood up to Trump in the first term. We successfully renegotiated NAFTA without giving up much but the name. We faced steel and aluminum tariffs like we are now, but we retaliated, and eventually they were brought down. Mark Carney can say, I've dealt with economic crises before, whether that was the financial crisis or whether that was Brexit. Therefore, I'm better placed. And Pierre Poilievre seems to be stuck in a rut. He doesn't quite know where to go on this. And so I think as a result, all the dynamics of the campaign have changed than what we thought a couple months ago. Now, I do believe that Trudeau thought that the Trump election might change things. And I think that's one of the reasons he stuck around as long as he did. The problem was there was so much anger at Trudeau that he couldn't address the Trump thing. But once you remove him and now you've got it more open, then it becomes, well, okay, we don't have a lot of anger at Poilievre. We don't have a whole lot of anger at Carney. We don't have a whole lot of anger at Freeland. Who of these three is best able to deal with President Trump?
So I do want to focus on the Conservatives in a moment, but I also want to talk about something you touched on there, and that is the Liberal leadership race. As you mentioned, both Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland have credentials to back up their claims that they would be best fit to take on Donald Trump. However, multiple polls are also showing that in the eyes of Liberals and eyes of Canadians, it seems like Mark Carney is pulling way ahead of Freeland as to who they think is better to deal with Trump. So why is that happening? Why is there a split there?
I think it's because we can debate about how much of an outsider Mark Carney really is. I think ideologically, he aligns himself quite well with Justin Trudeau, particularly on climate change. We can talk about how he was brought in as an economic task force leader in fall of 2024. But the fact is, he was not around. He was not part of the government. Where Chrystia Freeland, up until she had her very high-profile resignation in the middle of December, was the closest ally of Justin Trudeau. And so if you don't have to be Pierre Poilievre to go just like Justin when it comes to Chrystia Freeland. Even Justin Trudeau, in his resignation speech, talked about how closely associated Freeland was with him. And I think part of that is she's the one that knifed the prime minister. And often the person that knifes the king doesn't get to become king. And so I think there's some of that residue still at play, why Freeland is trailing Carney so badly.
More on the big story with political scientist Duane Bratt on the Liberal resurgence amid U.S. tariff threats and the shifting dynamics in Canadian politics in just a moment. So let's talk about the Conservatives now, because for the last 2 years, Canadians have heard Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre constantly telling them that everything in Canada is awful and it's all Justin Trudeau's fault. But in recent days, he's made a switch from Canada is broken to Canada first, and he's putting out videos, raising a Canadian flag, telling people to be patriotic and stand up for Canada. Explain to me the thought process behind the Conservatives as they try to pivot amid this changing dynamic among the electorate.
And that's the big challenge the Conservatives have, because you're right. They have focused on Canada is broken for a very long time, and that Pierre Poilievre is the only person able to repair it, right? So it's not just axe the tax. It's about building the homes and stopping the crime and fixing the budget. Those long videos he put out about debt and housing. But now all of a sudden we're seeing a resurgence in Canadian patriotism because there's an external enemy. And it is going to be difficult, not impossible, but difficult for Poilievre to go, everything's broken, nothing works, to, hey, it's great to be Canadians. We have to stand up to Trump in our broken down country. I mean, that's going to be a tough argument for him to make. And that's the problem that he's facing, is that the issues that he was campaigning on about housing and inflation and the carbon tax have all been superseded by something so big, so much more important. I have a sense of how Freeland would handle Trump. I have a sense of how Carney would handle Trump. But I think, like a lot of other Canadians, I really don't know how Pierre Poilievre would handle Trump. We could probably have said the same thing about Justin Trudeau in 2017. Trudeau was relatively newly elected. But what did he do is he worked out partnerships with the premiers. He brought in conservatives like Ryan Mulroney, like Rona Ambrose, like James Moore to help him. I can't picture Pierre Poilievre as prime minister saying, hey, I'm going to bring Chrystia Freeland into a committee because she negotiated with Trump the first time and I want to pick her brain. He's too partisan for that. And so I don't know how he's going to handle Trump. Now, he has said a lot of the right things about standing up to Trump and retaliation and all of that. But in the middle of each of those messages, he has to throw in a partisan shot at Trudeau. And I'm not sure that's what Canadians want to see right now. Now, if I was a betting man, I would still put my shiny loonie on Poilievre and the Conservatives winning, but not winning 230 seats as it looked like in the fall of 2024.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that federal modeling still shows the Conservatives would win 205 seats or maybe a bit less if an election were held today.
We're still looking at majority territory, not the supermajority, but it's the trend line that has to worry him.
And do you think that trend may continue to rise for the Liberals as these tariff threats hang over our heads, or do you think there will be an eventual plateau for the party?
Possibly, but I think things are going to get worse before they get better with the United States. So we had that brinksmanship around the across-the-board tariffs of 25% and 10% on energy, and then that got paused for 30 days. Well, then a week later, it was 25% on steel and aluminum. Right. And those are going to impact across the country, but they're concentrated in Ontario and they're concentrated in Quebec, where the most seats of the country are. And that 30-day delay is going to conclude prior to the Liberal leadership race. So things could be a lot worse by the time we have a general election as opposed to better.
All expectations are that we are going to get that general election by the end of March. The three opposition parties, the Conservatives, Bloc Québécois, and NDP, are all threatening to take the government down. But does this changing dynamic with the tariff threats and the resurgence for the Liberals change the dynamic for the Liberals? Like, might they pull the trigger early, or will they wait to be taken down by the opposition? How does this change the calculations for both the Liberals and the opposition?
And I think they do. I still anticipate an early election. And whether the new Liberal leader comes out and calls a quick election right off the bat, right after winning the leadership, whether they do that after a throne speech, because a throne speech, that's a powerful tool that the government has, is to deliver a throne speech, laying out their agenda, and then typically the session or the day ends. And there's a vote on the throne speech the next day. But I could see a situation where Carney or Freeland has that big throne speech. It will be paid to a lot more attention than in previous years because of the importance, and then going to the Governor General that next morning and call an election. Or the scenario would be, I'm going to deliver a throne speech that calls for the end of the consumer-based carbon tax, outlines a plan for dealing with Trump. Maybe there's a compensation program thrown in there, or dealing with those job losses as a result of tariffs, and then just daring the Conservatives to vote against that and bring them down.
All right, we'll have to wait and see how this turns out because, as we've been talking about, things can change rather quickly in politics. Thanks very much, Duane.
Okay, you're welcome, Cormac.
And that was Duane Bratt, a political scientist at Mount Royal University, speaking with me about what's driving voters back to the Liberal Party, how Conservatives are trying to pivot to address this shift in Canadian politics, and how it may impact the timing of the next federal election. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.